This video is going to introduce a concept called a graph, which is the main topic in a branch of mathematics called graph theory. Now, you may have heard the word graph in a math class before, like an algebra class, where you have the xy axis here, and you might graph, and you say, okay, that's like a parabola. But that is not the type of graph we're talking about here. It's a new, separate concept, so I don't want you to get confused there. And we're going to start this little picture here. It's a very famous problem called the Bridges of Königsberg, if I'm pronouncing that right. And it was solved by a guy named Leonhard Euler. And he created the field of graph theory in order to solve this problem. And so you see in this city here, there are these 7 different bridges, and they connect these 4 different islands in different fashions here. And the question was always, at least to the people that would wander the city here, the question is can you travel across each bridge exactly once without recrossing any. So basically Euler would take his walk each night, and he would start walking around the city, crossing these bridges, and he asked himself, well, is it possible that if I pick the right path, I can get across each bridge without ever crossing a bridge twice? And he started thinking about it, and eventually he did come up with the answer, and we will see the answer in a different video. But this was the idea. Now what he did was he looked at the problem in a different way. So instead of drawing out the actual map, he just took this whole area up here, and we're going to call that, say, A. And then there's this little island here, he's going to call that B. This mainland C, and this part is D. And then what he did was he drew a little picture like the following here, where instead of actually drawing out the map and the shapes of the land, he just labeled the 4 places A, B, C, D, and then he drew things that connected them. So there's 2 different bridges that connects A and B here, so I'll go ahead and do that. And then there's a bridge from A to D and from B to D. And then there's 2 bridges between B and C, and finally 1 bridge from C to D. And so this new way of drawing it, where you ignore the shapes of the actual islands and all you do is you care about how they are connected, this is the mathematical idea of a graph. And so the definition of a graph in mathematics is a pair of sets, which we're going to call V and E, where V is a set of vertices, that's where the V comes from, and that in this case the set V would be A, B, C, D, and a set E of edges, and in this case E would be these different edges here. Now we want to be a little bit careful how we write this down. I'm not going to be fully formal here, just to kind of give you a rough idea here. So let's see, we have a bridge that goes from A to B, and another bridge that goes from A to B, and a bridge that goes from A to D, and a bridge that goes from B to D, and a bridge that goes from B to C, 2 of those, and lastly a bridge from C to D. Now this notation is not quite proper mathematically, but we're just trying to get the concept down right now. And so you see every connection between the vertices, between the islands, is going to be an element in our E set, our edge set, where E contains all the connections between the vertices in V. And I want to point out something here. A graph can have lots of edges, but it doesn't have to have every possible connection. And if you look at this graph right here, notice that there is no direct connection from A to C. There's nothing there. So you don't have to have every possible connection. And in fact, when you only have some connections and not others, that's going to be a very significant fact when studying a graph. And so now that we have this way of drawing a new picture and we have this terminology of a graph with edges and vertices, it's going to turn out that if we go ahead and study these pictures and try to find out certain properties of them, they will allow us to solve questions like the bridges of Königsberg. So this is the idea of what a graph is. And then next we're going to look at the properties that a graph might have and introduce a bunch of different terminology.